One of the biggest lies ever told is that blood makes you family. Blood makes you related. Loyalty, love, and trust makes you family. And a young warrior, pushed down the wrong path by the loss of his sister, would one day learn how true this is. The siblings spent each day alongside their best friend, carving out an existence in a world full of harshness and cruelty. The earth was ruled by mechanical life forms, with the 7 mech knights standing at the top. The insectoid monstrosities known as the crawlers were a prevalent scourge across the land, and life for people was a constant struggle against their threat. Our young heroes knew that a better life was possible, and so they followed the path of destiny across the globe, eventually becoming embroiled in a great battle that would decide the fate of all life on the planet. This is the tale of a distant star, hidden far off in the depths of space, where people's dreams and desires mix, all circling around a key that was left behind by God. In days of long ago, there was a god who governed the movements of the heavens. That god used the dragons as its vassals to fulfill their duty of maintaining the heavens in a cycle of creation and destruction. However, the power of destruction grew each time it was used, and eventually, the balance of power between creation and destruction collapsed. The power of destruction had become so great that if it was let loose, it would have certainly destroyed the very heavens it was created to protect. God decided it was impossible to govern the heavens by themselves. Using the power of creation, a cage was forged, made of countless layers of the earthen crust, and the power of destruction was sealed within. The power of destruction, having lost its way, burned up, transforming into the planet's core. Its energy blended together with the power of creation coursing through the land, and the energy that flowed forth to the surface of the earth, giving rise to life, small existences that repeat the cycle of life and death. God turned the last vestiges of their being into a key, entrusting it to the life that had sprouted across the earth and disappeared. Over the countless years to follow, the power of destruction sometimes manifested itself on the surface, but each time, those small lives stood side by side with the dragons. In time, the key came to be known as a sword, while the power of destruction came to be known as the Great Darkness. And their story was passed down as the gallant epic of the world hero. Starlight hero, raise your sword and gather the light. You must vanquish the Great Darkness. There was a hidden village of humans in the great verdant forest known as the Celestial Forest. This village, which worshipped the god of the stars, had a sacred staff used in their rites and customs that had been passed down through countless generations, creating a barrier that protected the village from threats with its power. The successor of the staff at the time was Ib, who had an older brother, Ningu, and together the two of them spent time with their childhood friend, the young boy Aurum, and the small dragon whelp Imduk. The party is designed in a way that references the roles commonly seen in JRPG games, being heavily inspired by the structure and artwork of Xenoblade Chronicles. Crowned is the healer, Beckoned is the tank, Chosen is the hero, and Imduk is their loyal animal companion. The artwork for these four, while beautiful, does very little to build the world around the group, apart from Imduk, who can be seen gnawing on the eye of a crawler like a chew toy. Aurum and Ningu, seeking a means to reduce the burden of upholding the barrier even a little, spent day and night trying to beat back the crawlers. One day, Ib heard a strange and mysterious voice from deep within the forest. Together with her worried friends, Ib headed to the source of the echoes. She slipped deep into the forest before coming upon a mysterious massive structure. Her friends caught up to her, and together they approached the artifact, when suddenly the staff of Ib emitted a dazzling glow, followed by the massive structure coming to life as if in response to it. A small fairy, Lee, appeared before the band, still mesmerized by the staff and the relic glowing in unison. This is where we meet our final party member. Lee, the World Chalice Fairy, acts as the group's quest guide. When analyzing the artwork of the fairy, you might notice that she is orbited by 4 small devices casting the blue light that illuminates her body. These small satellites are actually hologram projectors casting the entire image of Lee, immediately warning us that she may not be exactly as she seems. If this was something you never picked up on, don't worry. This detail eluded me over the past 7 years as well, hidden in plain sight. In my defense, it is plausible that a fairy could exist in this world, and I had no reason to doubt her. Well, at least not initially. Lee bore the duty of leading humanity, but she was thwarted by the Mech Knights and sealed within the World Legacy World Chalice. She then revealed to Ib and her friends that she had been waiting for those who possessed the qualities to become the world heroes destined to protect this world. The World Chalice is the first of the World Legacies introduced to us in the story. The crew discovers the massive chalice sitting deep within the forest. In the art of World Legacy discovery, the young heroes can be seen staring in awe as the forest works to reclaim the relic. Once active, it glows the same pale shade of blue as Lee, who had been trapped within it by the vile Mech Knights. Each World Legacy is based on a religious artifact from our world. The chalice is, obviously, the Holy Grail. This is a significant reference for two reasons. The first being that the Grail is often depicted as a quest object, whose promise of everlasting life beckons adventurers from far and wide to search for its final resting place. This is most recognizable in Arthurian legend, and is a motif paralleled in our story. The second is the Grail's place in history as being used at the Last Supper, the final meal shared between Jesus and his apostles. It was at this gathering that Judas Iscariot would make an early departure, heading straight to the religious authorities as a sellout in exchange for 30 pieces of silver, a small pittance for the betrayal he has committed. This act of treachery holds an eerie similarity to events that will soon haunt our unwitting heroes.
You children are the world heroes. Please help me gather the scattered lights of this world and save it from the great darkness.
Wanting to protect humanity, they accepted the earnest wish of the fairy Lee, and thus the children of the Celestial Forest decided to leave their home. The power granted from the World Chalice by Lee allowed them to overpower the Crawlers, who had forced constant hardship on their village, but there were also 6 other World Legacies scattered across the globe with similar power. Upon hearing that, once gathered, the artifacts would grant them the power to defeat even the Mech Knights, the villagers of the Celestial Forest finally felt hope. These events are portrayed across a handful of cards. Lee blessing Ib with the power of the Chalice can be seen in World Legacy's heart. The party, now graced by the Chalice, are each given to us as individual Link monsters, with Ib the World Chalice Priestess, Ningirso the World Chalice Warrior, Aurum the World Chalice Blade Master, and Imduk the World Chalice Guard Dragon, all now clad in armor, emitting the same blue glow that has become emblematic of all things connected to the Chalice. These are also the first cards to reveal their actual names, and for Ningirsu and Imduk, these names hold some significance. Ningirsu is named after a god from Sumerian theology. In the theological story of Ningirsu, the being began as a peaceful harvest god, but would eventually become a god of war as ancient Sumer was militarized. This evolution of purpose foreshadows the fate of Ningirsu throughout our story. Imduk is likely based on Anzu. No, not that one. This one. A storied monster from several Mesopotamian religions, also known as Imdugud. This beast is most commonly depicted as a massive bird, capable of breathing fire and water, or as a lion-headed eagle. Ancient reliefs of the monster bear a striking resemblance to our Imduk. I'm also happy to report that his newfound responsibilities have not deterred him from his favorite chew toy. Even in Imduk's matured state, the crawler eye can still be seen on the ground next to him. The power of the Chalice as a tool of protection is demonstrated in World Legacy Landmark. Here we see Aurum, Ib, and Ningirsu standing before the Chalice in their new armor as the relic fires off a massive burst of energy, defending the boundaries of the village from the invading crawlers. Feeling content with the security their village was now afforded, the party headed out to the wetlands where the next World Legacy lay sleeping. What awaited them there, however, was a vast swarm of crawlers, along with the ex-crawlers that controlled them. The team divided their forces beneath the silent gaze of the World Legacy World Armor, and though they found themselves slowly being pushed into a corner, in the end managed to vanquish a vast number of the insectoid swarm with the aid of the clever Lee. The World Armor is based on the seamless robe of Jesus. This is the robe said to have been worn by him either during or shortly before his crucifixion. It symbolizes the unity of the church as all became united following the great tragedy that they had suffered. Likewise, the tragedies awaiting our heroes will unite them so deeply that their legacy would ripple across the universe. The scene our team happens upon when arriving at the site of the World Armor is captured in World Legacy in shadow. The armor is embedded in the earth, with a massive army of crawlers swarming every inch of it, attempting to steal its power. While the crawlers had been mentioned a few times up to this point, this is the first interaction we actually get to see involving them. The crawlers are enemies of the World Chalice, and following the RPG design used for the heroes, are designed after mob enemies typically seen in these games. Each of the original crawlers are named after parts of the human nervous system, hinting at the idea that the army exists as a hive mind, following the orders of one head being and never acting outside of their singular goal. Dendrite, Ranvir, Receptor, Glial, Axon, and Spine are all named after terms associated with neurons. Their physical appearances all resemble the diagrams you might see of their corresponding neurological counterparts in a science textbook. The Link monsters are slightly different. Neurogos and Synaphesis are named after the entire system of cells and synapses that make up the nervous system. This is fitting, as it is mentioned throughout the story that the X-Crawlers are in control of the lesser main deck monsters. Qualiarch is even more unique. This monster is based on qualia, a highly debated philosophical topic centered around singular subjective experience. For example, if I were to hand you a booster pack and out of it you pulled your chase card, you would be happy, ecstatic even. But if I were to then ask you what it feels like, suddenly there's no way for you to describe to me exactly what you feel. This is because the only person able to truly know what is being experienced in that moment is you. This would be the qualia, and many questions about characters' motivations throughout the story may be understood to some degree, but it's these unexplainable aspects of existence that we can't fully grasp without being in their shoes. Using this concept as the namesake for an X-Crawler is particularly interesting. While an argument can be made regarding the subjective experiences of most of the enemies being the reason for their actions, the crawlers are specifically built without feeling whatsoever. They only prey on those not literally hardwired to make optimal decisions without emotion. This begins a pattern of using symbolism not to represent the idea presented, but rather the antithesis of it. The party finally arrived at the World Armor, having given their all and used their wits to their fullest, but then the Mech Knights, the rulers of the realm of machines, suddenly appeared, glowing in the 7 colors of the rainbow. As Aurum and the others were stunned by the turn of events, things went from bad to worse. The Mech Knights ensnared him in an energy that even the barrier abilities of her sacred staff couldn't defend her from. Then they disappeared into thin air with her, leaving Aurum and the others behind, stunned at what had happened. A scene of the battle between the World Chalice soldiers and the Crawlers is shown to us in World Legacy Clash, where we see Aurum, Imduk, and Lee contending with the mechanical insects. But something is off. After taking a closer look at Lee, you'll notice that one of the hologram projectors appears to have broken, now emitting a deep purple light filled with red sparks of electricity. Perhaps it was just damaged amidst the war. As the battle raged, the Mech Knights would make their arrival in the Art of World Legacy Pawns, where we see Ningirsu and Ib staring down the Crawler army. 7 pillars of rainbow light can be seen off in the distance, each containing the silhouette of a Mech Knight. The Knights quickly snatch up Ib in the Art of World Legacy Trap Globe, ensnaring her in an orb of electric energy. Another look at Lee reveals that a second hologram device has been damaged, now emitting the same ominous light as the first, while the crew watches helplessly at the capture of their companion, powerless to stop the Knights as they disappear from the battlefield. The Mech Knights hold very little significance as individual characters, but their origins and purpose are integral to the story. Each Knight is powered by the energy of a star-shaped stone, with each stone matching the color of one of the world legacies, implying that a sliver of the relic's divine power has somehow been captured and channeled into the Mech Knights. It's also apparent that the Knights are cybernetic beings, meaning they must have been built by someone, but who? After Ib and her sacred staff were abducted, Lee told the party it would be dangerous to try and collect the other world legacies by themselves. After a long journey and much searching, they arrived at the ruins of a long-lost civilization that the Mech Knights had made their stronghold. There, the world legacies known as the World Lance and World Shield were already active. The arrival of Aurum and Ningirsu at the ancient city is depicted in the stunning art of World Legacy Scars. Our 2 wanderers can be seen atop a cliffside overlooking the ruined city, accentuated by the World Shield set atop a pile of rubble. The shadow of the World Lance plunged into the shoreline can be seen looming over the wreckage. If you look closely at the ruins of the city in various pieces of art, it isn't what we would consider ancient. The buildings appear to be skyscrapers and other forms of modern construction now left in shambles. This would mean that the civilization responsible for the city built technology surpassing our own before collapsing into the state we see now. The OCG name of this card, Scars Left by the Star Relics, provides another fascinating detail. This name could refer to the fact that the world legacies are all embedded in the ground, leaving literal scars on the earth. But it also works as a double entendre, implying that the presence of the world legacies and the constant warring over them has left scars on humanity. The world shield is based on Galahad's shield, once again making reference to Arthurian legend. The shield was gifted to the adventurer by a mysterious white knight after spending a few days in a monastery on his quest for the Holy Grail. The shield had a provenance going back to Joseph of Arimathea, a biblical figure who assumed responsibility for the burial of Jesus after his crucifixion and was destined to end up with Galahad. Depictions of the shield show it to be white, with a vermilion cross through the middle of it, symbolizing purity and bloodshed. The world lance is based on the holy lance used to pierce the side of Jesus as he hung from the cross. This relic is also associated with the yet unseen nightmares, and foreshadows their place in the story as weapons created to kill a savior of this world. While the Mech Knights appeared to act maliciously, Ib had doubts as to the idea that they were the embodiment of the Great Darkness, as they refused to injure her even after they kidnapped her and seized her sacred staff. In the Art of World Legacy Key, we see the captured Ib surrounded by Mech Knights as they confiscate her staff. She appears fearful, yet remains unscathed. Orym and the others couldn't have known the purpose of Ib's capture, so they responded to it with a surprise attack against the Mech Knights. They coordinated an ambush, throwing everything they had into the fray, but the Mech Knights, angered and enraged, finally combined as one into Mech Knight Spectrum Supreme. We get a good look at this war machine with its own Link monster, where we see pieces of each of the Mech Knights now formed together into an anomalous mechanical warrior. In the midst of this back and forth battle, where even one wrong move could have spelled defeat, Ningirsu noticed a chance and gave a signal to Lee. It was the start of a secret operation that Lee had proposed. The Mech Knights had noticed Lee's disappearance, but could not take their attention away from their fight with the warriors of the World Chalice. Ningirsu can be seen waving Lee off to start her infiltration in World Legacy Whispers, while the group battles Spectrum Supreme, currently preoccupied by Orym and Imduk in the background. The black and light of the fairy's hologram devices has become even more apparent, now leaving only one unit still producing the light of the World Chalice. We will soon learn what is causing this transformation. Ib was relieved to see Lee, who managed to sneak into the ancient ruins by herself and reach where Ib was being held. But then, Ib asked Lee about the truth of the Mech Knights and who they really were.
Maybe we shouldn't be fighting against the Mech Knights.
Lee slowly looked back at Ib, then flashed a sadistic smile, dropping the adorable facade she had kept since they had first met, and took on a much more terrifying visage. Lee revealed her true colors as she mentally took control of the body of Ib, causing the two to be reborn as Ibli. In World Legacy's secret, the truth of Lee's transformation is revealed. With all four of the devices now projecting the crackling dark light, Lee can be seen wearing a wicked smile, now cloaked in shadow along with the World Chalice. At this moment, Ib and Lee become one. Lee takes control, while Ib struggles for freedom, now a prisoner in her own body. The battle between the Mech Knights and the World Chalice warriors continued. They had identified Ningirsu as the strongest threat, but could not ignore the ever-growing strength building within Orym. Suddenly, a massive explosion occurred inside the ruins. A torrent of incredible power erupted from the World Chalice, greater than any seen before, and then, in the next moment, she suddenly appeared. It was none other than Ib, but the power that emanated from her, brimming with evil, was a telltale sign that she was no longer Ib. She smiled and told them that she was Lee, and that this body now belonged to her. Ibli released a wave of energy, forcibly canceling out the power of the World Chalice she had granted to Orym and the others. In their weakened state, she tried to take their lives as well. However, in a twist of fate, the Mech Knight stood alongside the warriors of the Chalice and chose to oppose her. The art and design of Nightmare Corruptor Idli provides many clues as to her true intentions. Her TCG name is a combination of Ib and Lee. Simple enough. But in the OCG, her name is Evilise, still a combination of the two OCG names Eve and Lise, but now forming a portmanteau of the name Iblis, an Arabic name for the devil. The kanji forming this name also use clever wordplay and homophone to imply that she intends to break the world. There is also the mention of fantasy in her OCG name, as present in the rest of the nightmares. This suggests the shift of reality into an abstract, dreamlike state. In her art, a treble clef can be seen on her chest. This use of musical symbols is consistent throughout the entire nightmare archetype, which she rules over. The treble clef is used to indicate the pitch of a musical piece, subtly suggesting her role as charge of the nightmares. The united form of the Mech Knights was undone as they found they could no longer endure the power of Ibli. The corruptor extracted the cores from most of the Mech Knights by force, and she tried to seize the sacred staff sealed inside the core of Blue Sky. Her theft of the stones is depicted in World Legacy's Corruption. But the Mech Knights knew the sacred staff was actually the key that controlled the fate of the stars and the very planet itself, so Blue Sky attempted to make Aurum his heir in this darkest hour. Aurum opened his heart to the Mech Knight and inherited the power of the staff. Now in his hands, the key transformed into a pair of swords. This passing of the torch is shown in World Legacy Succession, as Blue Sky desperately reaches out toward Aurum in a last-ditch effort to protect the future from this great evil. This explains why only 6 of the 7 stones can be seen orbiting Ibli in the same way her hologram devices once did. The 7th was passed down to Aurum by Blue Sky just before his destruction, giving rise to Mech Knight Avram, now wearing the armor of Blue Sky and wielding the 2 swords carrying the power of the sacred staff. Even though he inherited the key, the power of Aurum became a pair of swords because it was an indirect succession granted to him by Mech Knight Blue Sky rather than by Ib, the one true heir. When Ibli realized that Ib, sleeping deep within her, had the right of succession, she rushed to activate the World Lance before Aurum, who now could use the power of the key. While Aurum managed to tail her, he found himself struggling against the mythical beasts created by Ibli. However, Ningirsu, aided by Imduk, managed to catch up with Aurum and the monsters. Together they struggled to help Aurum, now depleted by their loss of the World Chalice's power, as everyone rushed toward the World Lance. But in the blink of an eye, Ibli managed to activate the World Lance first, launching a terrifying and intense attack against the heroes. Ibli used the cores of the Mech Knights to create beasts from myth and legend, each inheriting the characteristics of its source Mech Knight. Ningirsu rushed to the side of Aurum as his friends struggled to hold them off, and managed to defeat Mermaid in a single deadly blow. He then made himself the target of the other nightmares, giving Aurum a clear path ahead to chase after Ibli. In World Legacy's Nightmare, we see Ningirsu, now exhausted from the toll this fight has taken on him, as he attempts to face down Goblin, Phoenix, Cerberus, Unicorn, and Griffin alone. Despite his fatigue, his plan was working. Aurum and Imduk can be seen escaping the nightmares in the background, once again on Ibli's trail. As noted, each nightmare is born of the power of the stones ripped from the Mech Knights. The color of each nightmare corresponds to the stone used to create them, and their armor is made up of junked armor and weapons once worn by the Knights. They also all take the forms of mythological creatures, intensifying the manifestation of this dreamlike world created by Ibli. The face of each monster is replaced by a musical symbol, similar to the treble clef on Ibli's chest. Mermaid uses a fermata symbol and matches with the color and armor of Indigo Eclipse. Goblin has a simile symbol making up its eyes and assumes the color and armor of Green Horizon. Phoenix bears a coda symbol and steals its color and armor from Red Moon. Cerberus adopts the Del Segno symbol and matches the armaments of Orange Sunset. Unicorn's face is covered by a sustained petal asterisk symbol, and the spiked ring on its back is made of the wings of Yellow Star. And Griffin's face is replaced by the Alabrev, or time signature symbol, and its body is clad in a crown and armor made of pieces stripped from Purple Nightfall. Ibli picked up one of the swords in order to finish off Aurum, who had been injured by the power of the World Lance, but the dragon whelp Imduk leapt in front of her out of nowhere. Before its endangered friend, Imduk manifested a portion of its power as God's vassal. Although it was brief, it forced the spirit of Li to show itself, paralyzing her. That let the spirit of Ib finally awaken from the dark depths of her own mind. World Legacy Awakens is a depiction of this moment, as the small Imduk stands valiantly between Aurum and Ib, while the spirit of Li can be seen momentarily separated from her stolen vessel. Seeing the fallen Aurum and the sword in her hand, Ib realized what was going on, and made a sudden decision, turning the tip of the sword towards her own body and impaling herself. Ib's valiant sacrifice is shown in World Legacy Struggle. Li can be seen attempting to stop Ib from foiling her plan. The sword of Avram glows with magical energy as it's thrust into the stomach of its wielder. While loyalty, love, and trust are the bonds that can make living things strong, they can also be easily exploited and turned into a weakness. As long as she was in the body of Ib, Aurum and the others who had deep bonds with her would not be able to turn their weapons on their friend. Faced with the haughty and arrogant Ibli, Aurum grew stronger. The Mech Knights stood their determination. Ningu fought bravely, and Imduk awakened a hidden power. Ultimately, the ambitions of Ibli were shattered by a series of small but deadly irregularities stacking on top of one another. However, it was still a nightmarish ending for Orum and his companions. The aftermath of this harrowing decision is portrayed in the mournful art of World Legacy Sorrow. Orum lovingly holds the body of Ib as tears well up in the eyes of Imduk, and Ningu stares in disbelief, unable to grasp the reality of the loss of his sister. The bond between these great friends may be irreparably severed. In days of long ago, far before Orum and his friends were ever born, millions of years had passed since the time of the creation myth, and humanity had reached the heights of its prosperity. A power great enough to reveal the meaning of life itself. The dragons and their mission to protect the world's resources from being exploited were no longer considered to be a mere myth. It was during this era that the key was unearthed. At first, humanity was excited by the discovery of such a mythical relic, but they soon grew to fear the fact they excavated the key, considering it a sign that the clash between the world hero and the Great Darkness actually happened, and decided to analyze it. The scientist Lee made a name for herself across the world as the leading authority of computer science. Her participation as a part of the analysis team allowed them to make remarkable leaps forward in their research, but no one was aware of her true hypothesis, which fueled her powerful, sinful ambitions. She planned to seize the power of God. The secret hypothesis of Lee was built around the unseen side of the heroic epic, the true identity of the Great Darkness. In the legend, the power of the key is only spoken about as a force of good. It was able to call forth and control the powers of creation and destruction, and allowed the world hero to repel the Great Darkness. However, the inverse must be true as well. The key must have also created the Great Darkness. Not only was it capable of locking the world prison closed, but also of opening it. In truth, the heroic epic was actually the history of the conflict of those who fought over the key, between those who took on the mission from God and those who desired to revive the power of destruction for themselves. This flashback sets us up with the main theme of the story: balance. Creation does not exist without destruction. There is no life without death. Light will only be appreciated in darkness. And in the case of Lee, the truth hides behind lies. World Legacy's memory gives us a look at the lab where Lee conducted her research when she was still human. Blueprints of Mech Knight of the Morning Star and World Legacy Key are displayed on screens in the upper corners of the art. If you look closely at the scientists all at work, you'll notice some familiar figures. To the far left with blue hair, we see Lee. The woman sitting below her is an ancestor of Arborea. The short one in the middle is from Reclusia's tribe, even carrying the same wand as their crusadia descendant. And to the far right sits a forebear of Leonis. These inclusions are important. In the current world, these three are members of separate tribes, all focused on preserving the lives of their own. But in the past, we see that they once worked together, led by the lies of Lee to believe they were working toward the betterment of mankind. When disaster struck, none could know whether or not the others worked alongside Lee, and so they retreated into their own corners of the world, distrusting of the tribes around them. Whatever event caused this division must have devastated the entire planet. The key analysis team renamed themselves to Crusadia, an organization that directly reported to the nation's leaders. Project Mech Knight, a machine soldier development project, was advocated as a measure to deal with the coming threat to the world. Several years later, the ultimate weapon, Mech Knight of the Morning Star, was created, using the key as its power core. However, something happened when they attempted to turn it on. The key caused the energy of the stars to immediately invert. It flowed into the Earth's core, and this overflowing energy then shattered the crust, causing the power of destruction to leak out, and the Earth's surface was scorched black. All of this was planned by Lee. Just as the Great Darkness was about to return, 7 Mech Knights built by Crusadia as secondary support machines appeared and destroyed Morning Star. They then managed to seal the Great Darkness back into the Earth's crust. Fragments of the divine power remained on the surface in the forms of relics known as legacies, each containing portions of this power, similar to the key. Even though the mastermind behind the disaster, Lee, was discovered to have died, her scheme had resulted in the damaged and ruined land around them being incapable of sustaining and supporting the human race. Crusadia came to the conclusion that the reason that the world hero who could control the power of the key didn't appear in this era was a result of the Earth growing weaker, and thus they decided to focus on restoring the Earth's health and fostering life to spread and diversify. To that end, they gave a command to the remaining mech knights, giving them orders to suppress human civilization, classifying it as their top priority. The purpose of this order was to limit the sprawl of humanity across the Earth, consuming massive amounts of resources that would cut off the development of new life. The personality data of the staff of Crusadia was linked via brainwaves to the mech knights, and with that, the mission to restore the Earth began. Thus, Crusadia entrusted their hopes to the future, but there was something they failed to notice. While the body of Li had died, she had transferred her soul into the world chalice, which now carried her will and ambitions. Small clues about Li's existence while trapped inside the chalice are littered throughout the lore and even card art as recently as Rage of the Abyss. In this set, Never-Ending Nightmare Absorber joins the TCG with a curious piece of art. In this video I posted opening packs of the set, I remark on how it reminds me of Ghost in the Shell, and it turns out I may not have been too far off. Absorber, Li, and Ibli are all level 2 monsters. Li and Absorber are both fairy type, and Absorber and Ibli share battle stats. This, paired with the themes of Ghost in the Shell, centered around the idea of being able to upload a person's consciousness into a machine until it can be used again, illustrates Absorber as being a vision of Li while trapped inside the machine. This piece becomes only more haunting when recognizing how the serenity of the ghostly face of Li contrasts with the mischievous smirk of the robotic skull she is attached to. Is this a commentary on how easily she lies and manipulates, or another sad tale of a spirit wanting to be at peace while the world around her continues to drag her back into the fold? This fills in a lot of missing pieces from the story so far. We now know that the Mech Knights were created by Li and her fellow scientists as protectors against the Great Darkness, allowing Li to have the knowledge to easily dispatch them. We also learn the reason the Mech Knights acted with some hostility towards our heroes. Not only had they been commanded to limit humanity from overtaking the globe again, but the warriors of the World Chalice also fought alongside Li, whose catastrophic decisions were witnessed firsthand by the Knights. This also could explain why they captured Ib but did not harm her. They sensed the power of the World Chalice within her and associated that with Li, who had been trapped within the relic, but recognized the young girl to not be the evil that they sought. Mech Knight of the Morning Star uses an incredibly on-the-nose name to portray its role in the destruction of the Earth. Lucifer, the Christian devil, is a Latin word that translates to the morning star. There are also 7 world legacies, each representing a fragment of the Great Darkness, planted across the world after the World Key causes the influx of power that released the destructive force. This is reminiscent of the 7 deadly sins, temptations offered up by Lucifer to lure man away from God. These relics too draw the attention of all who seek power, leading them away from their fellow man. Lastly, this confirms that Crusadia was an organization set on bettering the planet, but was used as a tool for Li's machinations. Even in their dying moments, they remained committed to this goal. The reset caused by the explosion of darkness explains the primal appearance of the current inhabitants, greatly contrasting with the advanced society shown in the flashback cards. Now that civilization has been annihilated, they have resorted to a more primitive way of life, yet are still aided by the remnants of the technology left behind long ago. Years had passed since the day of that tragedy. Although Aurum was physically and mentally injured, he realized the danger of what Ningu planned to do, and decided to search for whatever remained alive on their distant star in order to stop Ningu from doing something truly irredeemable. To start, he discovered a crawler and restored its functions using the ability of the Mech Knights he now carried inside himself, and succeeded in melding minds with it. In doing so, he learned of information about several tribes from the records he was able to access from the mind meld. Aurum traveled to the lands of each tribe and learned their legends and literature, which let him slowly unravel the secrets of this world, coming to understand the existence of the sleeping power of the stars that both Li and now Ningu sought. In order to counter their shared objective, he asked the leader of each tribe to help him, and formed a tribal alliance. The alliance, likening themselves to the heroic warriors of the ancient civilizations, dubbed themselves Crusadia, reactivated the World Legacy World Crown, and began their march. Now backed into a corner, Aurum uses his newfound strength and purpose to ascend to Crusadia Maximus, clad in gleaming golden armor inlaid with veins of blue energy radiating out from the blue stone in his breastplate. His one remaining sword now too pulses with the energy of the World Chalice. His OCG name, Palladium of the Vast Sky, pays homage to the sacrifice of Blue Sky, with the added twist of using the word vast to symbolize the great potential that lies within this warrior. He begins his mission with the recovery of a once dangerous enemy, The crawler recovered by Maximus and Imduk is seen sitting, wrecked and abandoned in the darkness against a cliffside in World Legacy Survivor. In World Legacy's Mind Meld, Maximus can be seen using the power of the Mech Knights to scan the memories of the newly restored crawler spine. The once threatening blood-red glow of the crawler has been replaced by the familiar blue of the chalice as Spine becomes a member of Crusadia. He discovered from the records of the crawler the existence of the Igna Reclusia tribe, the Leonis Hortus tribe, as well as the Arborea Laka tribe, who kept the world crown hidden. Representatives of each of these hidden settlements are given their own line of cards. Crusadia Leonis, Arborea, and Reclusia are the leaders of their respective tribes. Their names each correspond to the realm over which they rule. Leonis, or Palladion of the 100 Beasts, oversees the animal kingdom. Arborea, or Palladion of the Divine Tree, rules over the sprawling plant kingdom. And Reclusia, or Palladion of the Yugioh, exists once again in the dreamlike realm hinted at throughout the story. The TCG name references confinement, likely alluding to the state of civilization in their current world. The OCG name references a concept in Zen meditation that refers to a kind of self-delusion that occurs when one clings too tightly to experiences in daily life. The mind is flawed, and allowing it to guide you to the truth of things alone can be a dangerous practice. This is also reflected in the story by the protagonist being driven by the idea of restoring life to a state when they thought it most pleasurable. The name and appearance of Reclusia lead me to believe that they exist as shamans, spending their time philosophizing about the truth of existence. The successful raising of this army is captured in Crusadia Revival, as our new heroes unite around the sword of Maximus. Imduk too has achieved new strength as Crusadia Draco, and has acquired new armor resembling the rest of the team. Their triumphant march begins in Crusadia Vanguard, with the leaders standing at the ready in the foreground, as silhouettes of their countrymen line the cliffs and sky behind them. Ever since the day of that tragedy, Ningirsu was purely driven by a single wish. To him, there was no point in a world without Ib, and if he could see her smile one more time, it didn't matter what he would have to do. Thanks to the cores of the Mech Knights he recovered from the 6 slaughtered nightmares, he learned the truth of the world, and by using lost technology, he constructed a body to house the soul of Ib. Next, he decided to create a world fit for her. Driven by an unwavering sense of purpose, Ningirsu began to build the Divine Gate, Babel. The technology used by Ningirsu to preserve the soul of Ib can be seen in Orchestrated Return. Ib's corpse is now seen floating in a tank of water, which is connected to Galatea by a system of hoses. The fluid in the tank glows the same pale blue as the chalice, indicating its presence within her, even after death. Ningirsu watches on from in front of the tank, holding the sword he took from Aurum in his right hand and an orange ribbon in his left. This same ribbon can be seen in Ib's hair braid and crowned and priestess. The Divine Gate is based on the Tower of Babel, a mythological tower in the Book of Genesis in the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Old Testament. The tower was built by the people of Shinar and stood as an act of rebellion against God, a false temple that pierced the heavens above. God responded to this descent by confusing their language, disrupting construction, and dispersing them all over the world. The purpose of the construction of Orchestrated Babel is of a similar nature. Ningirsu is angered by the unjust fate of his sister, and has built this tower to reach into the clouds and grasp the power of God. The mechanical doll that Ningirsu ultimately made, based on countless experiments, achieves replenishment of cellular induction from the corpse of Ib, as well as manifesting the abilities of one of the twin swords that he had taken. This means that the tank scene hooked up to Galatea is using the corpse to feed the new body energy. This does an excellent job of characterizing the desperation Ningirsu has been forced to in order to lower himself to such a desecrating act. Using his mechanical doll, as well as the World Lance, World Shield, and World Armor he had in his possession, Ningirsu reworked them to react with the World Legacy World Wand, forcing it to activate. The final World War was about to begin. Aurum and his allies would soon face Ningirsu. In the art of the World Wand, we see it's unlike the rest of the relics existing somewhere on the planet, or at least it was until the construction of Babel, the tip of which can be seen jutting out from the clouds to meet with the bottom of the World Wand. The Crusadia Alliance, led by Aurum, managed to get help from each of the major tribes, and together obtained greater power from the World Crown that had been kept secret by the Arborea Laka tribe. Now worthy of bearing the name Crusadia, they prepared to enter battle with Ningirsu. The world crown is based on the crown of thorns from the Christian New Testament. In the Bible, this crown was placed on the head of Jesus in the moments leading up to his crucifixion as an instrument of pain and humiliation, cutting into the skin of Christ and mocking his claim to authority. The selection of this holy relic as the centerpiece for the Crusadia rebellion creates a beautiful parallel between the motivations behind the leaders of each story. The crown of thorns is now seen as a symbol of the love Jesus had for the world, being willing to endure great pain and death in order to save it. This is mirrored in our story through Maximus and the actions he will eventually take to try to save the ones he loves. The world crown, hidden away by the Arborealaka tribe, hovered above a serene lake. Once activated, it granted new strength to the wielders, much like the world chalice. The result of the transformation at the will of the crown is demonstrated through the Crusadia Link monsters. Equimax, Regulex, Spatha, and Magus all take new forms fit for battle. Now outfitted with new armor and weapons, they stand ready for war. Aurum approached the tower, sensing the evil that threatened the world, all the while shuddering in terror at the majesty of Babel, which reached into the very heavens themselves. But standing between him and Babel was an endless horde of mechanical weapons called the Orchist. They were byproducts of the experiments of Ningirsu to make a suitable vessel for Ib. With how many he constructed, he had unintentionally created an army. The Crusadia Alliance found themselves in a corner, trying to fight off his strongest weapon, Orcustrion. And in the midst of the fierce battle, Aurum sensed something that had the same power of his key, emanating from deep within Babel. Here we learn the origin of the Orcus. Ningirsu, heartbroken over the death of Ib, built a grand tower to reach the wand. In his many attempts to build a suitable vessel to house her spirit, he created many unworthy prototypes. This is where Harp Horror, Symbol Skeleton, and Brass Bombard come from. In their artworks, we can see they all reside inside Orcustrion, the ultimate weapon built in the style of a cathedral, forcing Crusadia into great peril. An Orcustrion is also a machine that plays music from multiple instruments at once, creating the illusion of a full band. Likewise, the many cast-out prototypes seem to be under the command of Orcustrion. Each of the small Orcus slews out on some clever wordplay when being translated for the TCG. Harp Horror is Diver, referencing divertimento, a musical arrangement of a lighthearted vibe. Despite this oddly pleasant origin, its name also contains a pun that relates Harp Horror to the devil. Symbol Skeleton was originally Scherzon, taken from Scherzo, which refers to the third act or conclusion of a musical piece. The OCG name also uses a pun referring to a skeleton, similar to the English name describing the mechanical frame sitting atop the treads in this monster's design. Brass Bombard was changed from canon, a pun on canon, a compositional technique in which a melody is imitated by one or more parts of a specific time interval, and cannons, or the big metal tubes on pirate ships. A similar pun is maintained in the TCG, with bombard referring to both cannon fodder and a family of oboes used in contemporary music. The last and possibly most interesting note made in this passage is the presence of the same power of the key that Aurum carries. We know that Ningirsu took the sword that Ib used to sacrifice herself, but we don't yet know how he's managed to harness the power it holds. Ningirsu also undergoes a transformation himself, now becoming Longirsu, the Orcust Orchestrator. His long purple hair shrouds his somber face and cold eyes. He wears new armor built in the style of the Orcust army he's constructed, and carries the World Shield and World Lance that have also shaped themselves to match the armor of their current agent. The Shining Babel continued to grow and grow. The real goal of Ningirsu was not to build Babel up to the heavens, but rather to drop the world wand from them in order to destroy the Earth's core via kinetic bombardment. Then the world ark that slept deep underground would awaken, whose authority over life and death would allow Ningirsu to revive the soul of Ib. And following that, he planned to release the power of the Great Darkness sealed within the Earth's core and use it to transform the revived Ib into the world's new goddess, the Rebuilder of Worlds. Aurum rushed towards the mechanical doll responsible for initiating this plan, but found himself blocked by Ningirsu and his Orcust hordes and was dragged into a fierce battle. Ultimately, the world wand did drop, and the Earth screamed in agony. This first meeting between Aurum and Longirsu following the death of Ib is captured in the art of orchestrated Einsatz and orchestrated attack. Einsatz, meaning mission in German, is a wide shot of the battlefield littered with the Orcust army and Crusadia engaged in a battle surrounding Babel, now glowing a bright yellow. Orchestrated attack focuses our view of the battle on the Sword of Aurum colliding with the World Shield of Longirsu. Sparks of energy erupt from the sacred armaments. Longirsu bears the same icy indifference on his face as he stares into the eyes of the stoic determination of Aurum. The World Wand is based on either the Staff of Moses or Aaron's Rod. Moses and Aaron were brothers that lived during the plagues of Egypt. The story of Moses is fairly well known, using his staff to part the Red Sea, allowing the Israelites to escape Egypt and travel to the Promised Land. The World Wand is being used to part the earth and allow Ningirsu to reach his own Promised Land. The story of Aaron, however, is far less known. Following the plagues of Egypt, the priesthood had been eliminated, and Aaron had become a religious leader. Korah, arguing that all Israelites should be priests, opposed Aaron's position. This caused arguments to break out amongst the 12 tribes, each now believing they held the true claim to the priesthood. In order to end this, God instructed Moses to have each tribe offer up a rod to represent their leader. The rods would be held in the tabernacle overnight, and whichever one had been chosen would offer new life, sprouting blossoms and ripe almonds. When morning came, the rods were collected, and Aaron's had been chosen, allowing him to maintain his leadership. Today, the rod is recognized as a symbol of God's power and the forthcoming of Jesus the Messiah, who would one day come to save God's people. The World Wand may represent a similar arrival of a great force for good, but not in the way that Ningirsu intended. The ultimate collapse of the World Wand through Babel is seen in orchestrated collapse. A brilliant golden light erupts from the base of the tower where the wand pierced the earth, illuminating Galatea, who stands before it. The World Wand smashed into the Earth from its own orbit. The resulting impact tore the planet asunder, and the warriors of the Crusadia Alliance were caught in the aftershock. In order to protect his beloved friends, Imduk unleashed his power once more and created a giant barrier at the cost of his own life. After the impact settled, all that remained at the impact site was the Crusadia Alliance and the World Ark, which used its power and authority over death to assimilate the corpse of Imduk and remade him as Andrake. And to make matters worse, the aftershock of its power ran through the cracked and exposed core of the Earth and reached all of the world legacies across the planet, which caused the dragons to awaken. The World Ark has emerged from its resting place within the Earth. This relic is based on the Ark of the Covenant, a sacred relic considered to be the most important religious artifact in Israel. It was last seen some 2,600 years ago, lost after the Babylonians destroyed the temple in Jerusalem in 586 BCE. There have been many claims made regarding knowledge of its current resting place, though none have been verified. The reason it's seen in such high esteem has to do with its contents. The Ark is an ornate wooden chest coated in gold. The lid, also known as the Seat of Mercy, is said to be a plate of solid gold with 2 cherubim on either side, with the wings stretched out toward each other. Beneath this grand lid sat the 10 Commandments, handed down from God to Moses at the top of Mount Sinai. A jar of manna, a sign of God providing food to the Israelites in the harsh wilderness after their escape from Egypt, and Aaron's rod. While the ark still sat in its last known location within the temple, it was kept within the innermost room, the Holy of Holies, where it would be visited by the priest only once a year. The world ark sits hidden within the planet, encased in layer upon layer of earthen crust. The power of the world ark would make itself known immediately. We see Imduk's sacrifice for the life of his friend and guard dragon shield. The loyal dragon glows with energy as he endures a massive blast, driving his feet into the earth beneath him, now embedded in the terrain like the world legacies. Maximus and Arborea are seen frantically trying to hold back the Orcist army behind Imduk. The Ark recognized the purity of Imduk's soul, and immediately acted to restore him to life. But the Ark contained massive power, embodying the existence of life and death, and so what was born from the Ark's revival of Imduk represented the constant battle for balance between these two forces. World Legacy Guard Dragon is the moment that Imduk's soul is saved by the Ark. Aurum kneels over the body of his companion as the dragon's life force drifts into the sky above, seemingly being absorbed by a ball of strange material swirling in the sky. This same material can be seen in Guard Dragon Core Awakening, only this time the golden ribbons make up the line patterns present on Justicia and Andrake. These ribbons seem to act as an egg of some sort, and is what completes the transformation of each world legacy into their corresponding guard dragon. Andrake is the first true guard dragon we are introduced to. This dragon has 2 heads and a body that appears to be split down the middle. One half resembles Imduk, a symbol of life, while the other is black and vicious. This isn't replicated in any other dragon, and is the product of the warring powers within the Ark. Despite this twisted form, Andrake begins the pattern of each dragon being named in reference to a heavenly virtue. Andrea is the virtue of courage and is embodied perfectly by the selfless Imduk. The aftershock created by the release of the Ark's power is captured in Guard Dragon Cataclysm, a vision of the Homestar splitting apart as each of the world legacies becomes one of the 7 Guard Dragons, now embodying their might and purpose. The world legacies, which embodied the authority of God, having absorbed Imduk, transformed in order to exert the power of the very same God that once created them. They transformed into dragons. As mentioned previously, each of the guard dragons created in this event are given names linking them to a version of the 7 heavenly virtues. Garmedes is named after Charmides, the virtue of temperance or voluntary self-restraint. Promenesis is a portmanteau of prominence and genesis, highlighting the ties between the dragons and biblical theology. This name is also based on phronesis, which is the virtue of prudence, or the ability to govern and discipline oneself by the use of reason. Agarpain is based on agape, the virtue of love or charity. Pisti is named after pistis, the virtue of faith, and Elpi after Elpis, the virtue of hope. Orchestrated release shows Longirsu now carrying the body of Ib, headed for his mechanical doll. With the power of the key transplanted into it, Ningirsu would be able to control the dragons. Finally, with all the required powers integrated, the soul of Ib was revived with the power that ruled over life and death. But the smile on the mechanical doll's face was not the one he anticipated. At the very moment he called the soul of Ib back, Lee, who remained a part of her, took the initiative and seized control of the mechanical doll. Using the power of the key inside of her, she erased the soul of Ib. Her appearance bears many symbols relating to her existence. She carries a scythe, the blade of which is actually the sword of Avram that Ningirsu took with him following the death of Ib. There is a symbol on her torso that matches the one seen on the chest of Morningstar. This symbol is a stylized 8-pointed star, or the Morning Star, which carries significance in many modern and ancient religions. Seeing as how much of this story is based on biblical canon, the Christian symbolism of the star correlates it to the Star of Bethlehem, or Star of Redemption. It represents rebirth and resurrection and is associated with the birth of Jesus Christ. Both Galatea and Morningstar were meant to be a source of redemption for their builders. Morningstar was meant to give Lee the power to reshape the world in her own vision, but failed. Galatea was meant to allow the spirit of Ib to be resurrected so that she could live alongside her brother once more, but again, seemingly failed. There was no heir to the key capable of reviving God among the humans born in the age of machines. Lee concluded that not even Morningstar was good enough and decided to use the machine civilization itself in order to purge the surface of the earth. Even humanity's hope for life to take root once more was within the scope of her plan. When an heir who could activate the world legacies finally appeared after countless ages, she schemed again. Stopped once again by the heir, her goody two-shoes friends, and that meddling dragon, her obsession with that power grew even greater and more maddening. She absorbed the corpse of Ib and 5 of the guard dragons, and having done so, Idli obtained the authority they held, and now finally had the power of God at her fingertips. Once again, Idli's card is filled with a lot of subtle information. We now know that she's absorbed Galatea, the corpse of Ib and the power of the key along with her, and 5 of the guard dragons, only sparing Andrake and Justicia. Orcus Nightmare is the form she takes after erasing the soul of Ib and stealing control of Galatea. The twisted form of this monster allows us to see a glimpse of the absorbed corpse of Ib, with one of her eyes peering out from the gnarled mess that has been made of the victims. She then transforms further into Nightmare Incarnation Idli after obtaining the divine power of the guard dragons. The influence of both Ib and Galatea are captured in the weapon carried by Idli. The handle of the axe is the same as the one on Ib's staff, and the blade is repurposed from Galatea's scythe. The OCG version of Idli's name, Astroimer Idlis, is a puzzling choice. This name references Idris, the second prophet in the Quran following Adam, who has been identified with the biblical Enoch. Enoch was said to have been one of only 2 men in the Bible chosen to escape death, as he was led into heaven alive. So too has Lee escaped death for many years. Enoch is considered a symbol of dedication and a model of faith and righteousness, acting as a reminder of the rewards that await those that walk with God. In a sense, this could all be said of Lee, if only you were to twist your interpretation to fit the mind of the crazed world breaker. She has committed her existence to reforming life for what she perceives to be the betterment of the planet. Having followed this path, rather than being punished, she has now ascended to a godlike being in her own right. The most clever aspect of this association between Idli and Enoch comes from chapter 13 of the Book of Enoch. This story tells of a vision had by the titular prophet, warning the Watchers, a group of angels sent to earth to watch over mankind that would eventually rebel against God, that a severe sentence had been pronounced against them for their sinful and godless actions. This is used to emphasize the consequences of straying from righteousness. The description of the Watchers after receiving this news is one of fear, as they tremble thinking of the weight of the actions they've committed, and now know they must accept accountability for what they've done. Idli is not meant to represent the result of following the words of Enoch, but rather what awaits you if you don't. Finally, the physical appearance of Idli draws from the deities of her birth and destruction within the Yugioh universe. The gem on her forehead, horns, translucent wings, and golden line work decorating her arms are also all seen on Sophia, goddess of rebirth. Her tail takes the same shape as that of Tiara, source of destruction. The pitting of these two massive, opposing forces against each other results in the cracks forming on the skin of Idli, demonstrating the clashing of life and death, creating such an immense force that it's literally splitting her at the seams. The three also share the same kanji for star, also present in the names of the world legacies, or star relics. Throughout the story, stars are presented as a source and symbol of the divinity present in this world. Idli called forth the power of God sealed inside the Earth's core and used it to awaken the central nervous system, Deus Ex Crawler. She desired to reign as a complete and perfect God, incorporating the power of God into her very being. Deus Ex Crawler is based on the concept of Deus Ex Machina, a Latin phrase meaning God from the machine, referring to the part of a story where a seemingly unsolvable problem is abruptly resolved by an unexpected or unlikely occurrence. The shapeless forms emerging from the openings of the giant crawler can be seen in droves beneath Idli in the art of world legacy monstrosity. The use of the crawler's central nervous system indicates Idli's ability to force her will over the life forms of the planet, much like she tried to do while still human. This power is perhaps further displayed with the manipulation of Andrake into allowing the power of death to consume it, leaving only world legacy guard dragon Mardark now standing alongside Idli in battle. Mardark is a play on the name Marduk Apla Idina II, a Babylonian king from the Bible famous for maintaining Babylon's independence from the Assyrian kingdom for more than a decade. In the Bible, this is an act against God, as the king sought to maintain a city that stood as a symbol of man's sinfulness. In our story, Mardark serves a similar purpose, as the soul of Imduk, much like Ib, has been trapped inside the monstrosity, separating the loyal companion from his friends. All hope had been lost when guard dragon Justicia suddenly flew in from the celestial forest and unleashed its power. It merged with the body of Ib after tearing her free from the chest of Idli in the art of guard dragon reincarnation, and the two were reborn as Ib, the world chalice Justiciar. Justicia, the last of the heavenly virtue dragons, has arrived. Its pale blue glow identifies it as the world chalice born to life, and its name refers to the virtue of justice. Sensing the power of the world key still within the body of Ib, Justicia merges with her to give rise to the world chalice Justiciar. While the guard dragon represents the virtue of justice, Justiciar is a Latin title for the administrator of justice, and Idli is in her sights. Ib's new body has an angelic appearance, only accentuated by the white border of a synchro monster. She no longer carries her staff, but instead holds the great axe that had once been in the hands of Idli. Yet another instance of the mirroring and balance shown between the forces of life and destruction in this world. Idli, who had control over all the powers and authorities of God, had her power seized from her by Ib, now dwelling inside of Justicia. The soul of Ib should have been erased during their fusion, but it was actually the soul of the mechanical doll that Lee had erased. Although the mechanical doll was originally made to be a mere vessel, at some point it gained its own sense of identity. Galatea was a name that the doll destined to become Ib secretly gave herself, as no one else had bothered to give her one. Galatea, according to information she accessed from the records of the ancient civilization, was a name that belonged to a woman who was loved and became a flesh and blood human being. When Lee and Ib fused, Galatea sacrificed her own soul in place of Ib. Meanwhile, the soul of Ib was transferred to the world chalice, which had later been remade into guard dragon Justicia. The Galatea referenced by the robot was the name of a statue carved by Pygmalion in Greek mythology. The sculptor loved his creation so dearly that he repeatedly prayed to Aphrodite to bring her to life, until one day the goddess accepted his pleas. and the two were married. Unlike many Greek myths, this story ends with the newlyweds being blessed with happiness and prosperity by Aphrodite, and the two would have children and live a wonderful life together. This origin makes the already depressing story of our Galatea downright heartbreaking. We know that Ningirsu thought of her as nothing more than a vessel, because in the moment she is awoken, he calls out to Ib, the only reason for her existence. Even despite her deep loneliness and desire for happiness, when offered a choice whether to live or die, she sacrifices herself to preserve the spirit of Ib. This also explains how Justicia was able to revive Ib, even after her soul had been seemingly erased. Galatea gave her one more chance at the cost of her own life, and when the chalice became Justicia, it was already carrying the soul and only needed a body to place it in. Having lost the power of the key, Idli went on a rampage as she could no longer control the massive amount of power contained inside her body. It soon collapsed onto itself. In this moment, the revived Ib joined forces with Aurum and called the soul of Imduk back from Marduk. Imduk then evolved into Almarduk, amplified by the power of life itself. The spirit of Imduk has been freed by the power of friendship, and has now become World Chalice Guard Dragon Almarduk. Interestingly, this name is also based on the same king Marduk was a reference to. The reason being that, although seen as a progenitor of sin in the Bible, in Babylonian mythology, Marduk was the patron saint of Babylon and represented creation, justice, compassion, and healing. We once again are being shown that there are two sides to every coin. Sadly, their hope was short-lived. The depths of the earth had been destroyed by the X-Crawler slowly feeding on the power from the core, and from this husk of a planet emerged the world gears, the vessel of God's power. The world gears of theological demiurgy finally make their appearance. In its art, we can see 6 orbs rotating around the mechanism, each colored to match each of the attributes in Yugioh, representing its connection to all things in this universe. The name Theological Demiurgy links this monster to the Chintamanti Temple of Thur and the deity Demiurge. The former is an ancient temple built in honor of Ganesha, the supreme god to the Ganapatiya sect of Hinduism. The latter is an artisan-like being in Platonic philosophy that is responsible for maintaining and shaping the physical universe. Standing before the world gears, the embodiment of the great darkness, the other name of the power of destruction, Aurum decides to try and fight back. Having once partially inherited the key from Mech Knight Blue Sky, and with the power of all world legacies assembled, Aurum decided to strike the great darkness down. As Aurum tried to unite the various powers together, Idli sensed it and tried to make one final desperate attack. However, it was Ningirsu who stopped her. In response to the dying wish of Galatea, he used the remains of Babel and his former army of Orcus to forge Ningirsu, the Orcus of the Evening Star. The moment Ningirsu begins to assemble his ultimate machine is captured in Orcus Crescendo. Ningirsu stares down Idli as he pulls a spear from the earth, the same spear that will soon be held by his strongest machine yet. Ningirsu, the Orcus of the Evening Star, is an amalgamation of the wreckage left behind by the destroyed orchestrated Babel and the once relentless soldiers of Longirsu, a literal depiction of the catastrophic aftermath created by the disastrous decisions of Ningirsu on a quest to restore his sister's soul. Although he's failed so far, it's best to remember that, in this life, there are no winners and losers, only victims and students, and in this moment, Ningirsu chose to learn. As with the rest of the boss monsters in each archetype, the name of Ningirsu's creation holds many clues about its importance in the story. Ningirsu is rooted in the word Dingir, a Sumerian word meaning god. The Evening Star portion of the name refers to Hesperus, the Evening Star, in Greek mythology. At night, Hesperus, the Greek name of Venus, could be seen gleaming in the darkness and was named the Evening Star. Its arrival was considered a symbol of beauty, love, and a peaceful evening. It was greatly associated with transformation, as it signaled the shift from day to night, and our monster represents a similar transformation in the heart of Ningirsu. Lastly, in the OCG, this card is called Sheol-Fagul Dingirsu, here alluding to Sheol, the Hebrew land of the dead. Our story has contained a constant blurring of the line between what it means to be alive or dead. As such, the machine created to begin a new future in which all aspects of life and death will be rebuilt, being named after such a realm, is fitting. The attack from the Crusadia alliance led by Aurum, the unexpected rebirth of Ib, and finally, the counterattack of Ningirsu. The body of Idli, which had lost all sense of higher thought and reason, was finally destroyed by the attack of Ningirsu. but her very existence continued to cling to the throne of God until the very end despite losing all rationality or sanity. Now lost adrift in a sea of madness, Lee forced her soul to merge with the world gears due to its synchronization with the X-Crawler. Her body, no longer in possession of the key, was now unable to restrain and control the incredible power the throne possessed, and as a result the world gears, reacting to the evil will of Idli, went completely out of control. World Legacy Collapse provides a straightforward image of the gears as they begin to whir with uncontrollable might. Now responding to its connection with Idli's evil thoughts, its rampage causes the earth to begin crumbling around it. Its existence, which harbored the power of God that would create and destroy worlds and even stars, started to bring about the destruction of the world faster as a result of its leaking power. The world gears, which had become the avatar of destruction, had reached a level where it was no longer possible for it to be held back by the seal of God in the Earth's core, and it seemed like the end of the world was all but certain. But then Aurum, having fully inherited the key as well as having completely integrated the power of the world legacies into himself, became a legendary being that had been whispered of throughout eternity. Mech Knight Crusadia Avramax. Aurum was the prince that was promised, the world hero. Aurum receiving the full power of the World Key is shown in the Art of Crusadia Testament. He once again holds both blades given to him by Blue Sky, the original and the blade stolen by the hand of Ningirsu and now reimagined into Ib's great axe. Both glow the familiar pale blue as Aurum is surrounded in support by his Crusadia comrades, Ib, the Spirit of Blue Sky, and Almarduk. It seems this collection of power cost his allies their lives. In Crusadia power, Reclusia and Leonis can be seen standing behind Maximus, yet now take on a ghostly appearance similar to the one seen in other spirits throughout the story. It's cost Aurum everything he held dear to achieve enough power to end this fight. The OCG name for this card, Albade Palladion, uses the phrase Albade in a display of juxtaposition against Ningirsu. An Albade is a poem or piece of music set to capture the feel of the dawn of an early morning. The evening star signals the transition to night, appearing just before the world gears begin to collapse, while Avramax signals the dawn of a new future as he works to save the world. Mech Knight Crusadia Avramax presents symbolism on par with the rest of the main monsters in the story. His OCG name, Palladium Astrum, references a lustrous silvery white metal with an appearance similar to the armor worn by Avramax. A palladium is also a sacred relic thought to protect a city, people, or nation in the Christian Church. The practice of carrying a palladium in procession around the walls of a besieged city became prominent around the year 550, following the reign of Justinian the Great, a Roman emperor best known for his ambitions to restore the territories of the Western Roman Empire. His armaments also allude to other aspects of his journey so far. His shield is made up of pieces from Crusadia Crawler, who was likely also sacrificed in the ritual that allowed Avramax to arise. When looking at his sword, you'll notice that the handle is the same as the one seen on the World Key, but the blade takes an appearance similar to the seven-branch sword. This sword was given as a gift by the king of Baekje to the Yamato ruler sometime during the Chinese Jin dynasty. The exact purpose of this gift is unknown, however two main theories provide some insight. The power and wealth of a military capable of creating such an intricate piece would have to be advanced, as this would far surpass the standard metalwork possible at the time. This means that the sword is not only a beautiful display piece, but also a warning against any thoughts of rebellion that the Yamato ruler might have. The other possibility is more divine in nature. The 7 branches of the sword are theorized to be representative of the 7 stars of the Big Dipper, a constellation often associated with deities in Eastern Asian theology. This sword, like the World Legacies, is linked to the stars in the heavens. The World Key is even noted as being hidden amongst the stars before its discovery on Earth, and this celestial connection only grows more important as the story reaches its climax. Avramax charged straight into the heart of the World Gears, where a remnant of the mind of Lee lingered. There he learned the truth about the god that created their world. The World Gears of theological demiurgy is really the prototypical form of all gods, a vessel that does the will of God in response to the will of the being inside it, an apotheosis program, the epitome of a perfect tool. The entity that had previously occupied the World Gears used it to control and operate the movements of the heavens, but whoever they were, they disappeared in the process of sealing the out-of-control power of destruction deep within the planet. Avramax making entry into the World Gears is seen in World Legacy Cliffhanger, as he charges straight into its core. Once inside, he finds a remnant of Lee, once again in her human form. This is shown in World Legacy Bestowal. Though the card effect implies that Lee is the one making the choice between eliminating Avermax or allowing him to ascend to the form of Evita to fix the world, the Master Duel lore states it's actually Avermax that must decide between either destroying the world gears to preserve the current world or merge with them to become a god. And now once more, a crisis has occurred due to its power. If it continued to rampage like this, it would not only destroy the world, but the heavens as well. Avermax, thinking that because he had become the awakened master of the key, he could control it, completely unleashed its power. Instead of trying to destroy God, he chose to try and become one with the vessel. And thus, Evita, Rebuilder of Worlds, was born. Evita, Rebuilder of Worlds takes on a similar appearance to the other gods throughout Yugioh. The 7-branch sword can still be seen on the left side of the image, as well as the stone that once belonged to Blue Sky still embedded in the chest of Evita. On the lower portion of the god's body, as well as on the appendage stretched out on the right side of the image, 2 cores from the Cliffort monsters can be seen. This archetype is based on the 10 emanations of the Qlifoth that form a distorted reflection of the Tree of Life, themselves forming the Kabbalistic Tree of Death. This keeps in line with the motif of balancing the 2 natural forces throughout this journey. Evita's effect also incorporates some flavor relating the card to the deity in the story. Avermax must relinquish his physical being to become a god. This monster requires the banishing of link monsters, like Avermax, to summon. It also rebuilds the board state from the ground up by shutting down any interactions with it while shuffling every monster but itself back into the decks. A practice that will soon be mirrored by Evita as he reshapes existence. The name Evita was taken from an artificial life simulation system designed in 1993 at Caltech. The purpose of the software is to simulate evolution by introducing computer programs that will compete for computer resources, such as processor time and access to main memory. These programs are able to modify themselves as they see fit to attempt to earn more of the resources that they seek, allowing researchers to study evolution on a much smaller timescale than we see in the real world. The Evita software was inspired by the Tierra system. Tierra is a software designed prior to Evita with a similar purpose in mind, also being used to study evolutionary and ecological dynamics. The use of these systems goes beyond just being a unique source material. If you'll remember, Lee was also a computer scientist in a past life. Her mission was to create a program that would give her control over the evolution of the planet. This lines up perfectly with the themes throughout the story regarding every tool being capable of great and terrible things depending on who is placed in control of them. The newly born deity Evita, armed with the power of God surpassing all human understanding that he obtained after countless merciless battles, hoped he could restore the original world he used to live in as a human, along with Ningirsu, Ib, his crusadia allies, and all of the other lives lost in the World War. It might have been a very human and self-righteous thing for a god to do. Maybe it was more sensible to punish them by destroying the world. But ultimately, he chose to absorb the crumbling world into the vessel and booted up a restoration program for the life forms born on that world, in doing so creating the events of world reassembly. And then, there was light.
Execute process, World Restoration Program.
On this day, in a dazzling light, she lost consciousness, and then when she awoke, what she saw was a calm night sky laid out before her. With the twinkling light of the stars gently illuminating the world around her, she embarked on a journey. Sometimes, the sword she held would blink and glow with a faint light. What laid ahead on the path it guided her on, no one knew. Still, that girl entrusted her hopes to its blinking light, continuing to journey the world he left behind.
Aram disappeared from the planet as Evita at the end of the World War, with his name carved into history, leaving behind the key, now in the form of a sword. The battle for the power of God must never happen again. Ib carried the sword, traveling the world restored by the person that mattered most to her. Ningirsu, who once walked down the wrong path, was revived as a knight who protects the world. Following the earnest wish of his friend Aram, he pledged to watch over and support Ib in secret. With him was the fairy Galatea, snuggled up close beside him. When Ningirsu was revived, he became Girsu the Orcust Mech Knight. In his art, Galatea can be seen now reborn as a fairy, hovering close to the armor of Girsu, outfitted in armor reminiscent of his once grand Orcust empire. The bond between Girsu, Galatea, and Ib has become enshrined in card effect, allowing Girsu to summon his loyal fairy to the board as the World Legacy token, seen on her own card being held in the hands of Girsu. The two can then be used to synchro-summon Ib, the World Chalice Justiciar. However, though they are never too far away, the two must leave the board for Ib to arrive, another instance of the story coming alive in the game. This connection is further stated by the same orange ribbon seen in Return wrapped around the right arm and hand of Girsu, a symbol of the only piece of Ib that he's been able to carry all these years. In the art of the token, the same ribbon can be seen in his left hand, as well as a second ribbon wrapped around the neck of Galatea, both now carrying a deep connection to her. We eventually get a glimpse of Girsu and Galatea keeping good on their promise in Vesper Girsu. The pair can be seen exterminating an unknown enemy with a powerful barrage of energy. And with the most recent wave of support being announced, it seems the future for these two has been prosperous. Enlil Girsu, the Orcust Mech Knight, seems to be an even stronger form of Girsu. His name now references Enlil, the Mesopotamian god of wind, indicating that he too has reached godlike strength. The question remaining is whether he achieved this on his own, or if it was yet another gift from his old friend Aurum after proving his loyalty to the oath he's taken. Galatea also receives a new body in the form of galatea-i, the Orcust automaton. Ningirsu seems to have been hard at work constructing a new body for her to inhabit once again. The transparent blue features of the torso and legs resemble the body of guard dragon Justicia, and the distorted 8-pointed star can be seen glowing blue on a disc within Galatea's chest. Perhaps she still carries a piece of the World Chalice within her. And if you ask me, she's the perfect candidate for such a responsibility. And how could Aurum ever forget his old crawler ally? Crusadia Crawler has been rebuilt, now becoming Crawler Soma, still sporting armor similar to what had been given to it after joining Crusadia. It even has the same blue glow and battle stats once held by Mech Knight Blue Sky, hinting at the possibility that both have been given a new chance in the world born into one body. The merging of two souls into one body has been portrayed as a terrible fate in every other instance in this story. But, keeping with the theme of balance, this situation is different. Blue Sky was a sliver of divine energy that was placed into a mechanical body so that he could act on the will of the gods. He had no body. Spine was almost exclusively a body designed as a tool to follow every command he was given by the X-Crawlers in charge of the army. It had no mind. The two together create a symbiotic relationship, allowing the crawler to do what it does best, follow the plan, while Blue Sky acts as a pilot, allowing both to continue on in the world following their natural instincts. Due to the effects of the restoration program executed by the Rebuilder of Worlds, the key that was so entwined with the fate of the world was remade into a sword that absorbed the power of the world legacies. Ib, the master of the sword known as the World Key, went on a journey to find a place to seal it forever and prevent the tragedy from ever happening again. The World Key is the only relic not based on a religious artifact. It also doesn't connect to a color of the rainbow, containing a single black stone in the blade. While all lights from the legacies combined would produce a white light, this absence of color symbolizes that not only have they finally been united, but also put at ease, no longer radiating constant energy as the key floats peacefully through space. The key has been entrusted to Ib, now Lib the World Key Blade Master, once again restored to her human body. Miraculously, the power of the Rebuilder of Worlds repaired the destruction caused by the Great Darkness. Countless stars twinkled in the sky, and the breath of life could be heard all around. And Ib, who is given the World Key, pushed forward with determination in her heart, to where the world legacy leads next. This is our final moment with our heroes. Lib now travels the world searching for a way to seal the power of the World Key away from humanity with Imduk at her side. In this last glimpse of our heroes, Lib and Imduk stand under the glow of a peaceful night sky as the World Key generates a ray of light reaching toward the heavens. The two no longer require armor in this new world, now free from war and senseless death. Instead, they'll spend the rest of their days together, content with the purpose they've been given, until the day finally comes when they can reunite with their friends somewhere out there in the vast sea of stars.